Welcome, friends, to another episode of the Lifestyle Empowerment Podcast. On today's episode, I figured I would just discuss my gut health journey, what I've been through, what kind of initiated me to take this path with my own health, but then seeing the effectiveness in helping others using gut health protocols, but kind of like what I did to help things come into fruition and address my gut health. So if you're watching the video here, I'll post my before and after of my gut health, just where you can see the distension, and then working with somebody helped me address this situation, but I'll get into all of that. And I also think by sharing my story will help others understand what is entailed. A lot of my clients are going through gut health protocols right now, and it's not easy. By no means is it easy at all. There's a lot of things that someone can experience that they may think is wrong, is hindering them, is working backwards, when in reality, it's actually progression. As paradoxical as that sounds, sometimes the worse you feel means we're actually getting things done. So most of my life have had gut issues. There's two memories, like I don't know the word I should use is core memories that I recall when I was a child that I had distended guts. Well, one, I was born not breathing. I've always had breathing issues. That's why when you hear me take a deep breath, you'll hear that restriction. Even when I've been my lightest, my leanest, my healthiest, there's still always some sort of restriction. So I had to deal with those health problems. But when I couldn't tell you the age, it would have been under 10 because my parents were still together. I always recall, I don't remember the full story, but I do recall I was showing my sister my stomach or something, and she claimed that I was sucking in, and which I was sucking in because I was embarrassed of my distended stomach, even at a very young age, from as long as I can remember, 7, 8 years old and up. And so I remember her calling me on that and being embarrassed, but just denying it. And then one day, it was like a week or so afterwards, I ran downstairs when she was watching TV on the couch. And with my shirt on, though, I said I sucked in my stomach because she had claimed she could see my face change. And that's how she knew I was sucking in my stomach. So with no context and obviously with the shirt on, so you can see my stomach, I sucked my stomach in. And I was like, did my face change? She's like, no, what are you doing? I'm like, I told you, right? So it's really dumb, but that's how I remember that I've had these issues for a long time. Not to mention just like constant temper tantrums and everything as a kid that I recall. And then there was another one where my parents had just gotten divorced and my dad had moved into this little apartment and me and my sister were visiting and she was playing The Sims on the computer and I was leaning up against the back of the chair with like my gut hanging on the back of the chair. And at this time I was 10 or 11 years old. And I remember both my father and my sister poking fun at my stomach. What I also used to do is my dad had what's the color? Burgundy, maybe? I can't remember. One of those purples. Dually Dodge truck. And I used to always, when I would sit, I would lean forward as far as possible. So I would lean on my stomach to hide my stomach. And I remember him always giving me trouble saying, you're going to wreck your back and everything, to which I did throughout all the years of sucking in and hiding my stomach. I was ashamed of it. I was extremely embarrassed. And at that time, though, all that mattered to me was the aesthetics of having a distended gut and not having abs, though, even as a young kid. So this is like, we go back and if we really think about it, we're affected lots as children, even aesthetically. So I was always ashamed of that, but it didn't matter to me the health complications. It didn't matter to me the extremely severe case of sleep apnea that I had. It didn't matter to me the prediabetes, the high blood pressure, the high cholesterol. Knowing these things at the time, all that mattered was that I was hiding my stomach. And of course, I wanted to be bigger. And I've told this story before that something programmed my mind that bigger is better. So I did whatever it took to be bigger, thinking people will love and respect me if I am bigger. So that just like exacerbated the gut issues. But I had been dealing with these for as long as I can remember. And also in our one home, there was cold rooms. And I stayed in that bedroom with the cold room next to it. So mold exposure, because that's what we ended up finding out later, was I had high levels of mycotoxins. And so just this whole array of health issues. And so I've been battling them along for quite a while. And being in the position that I'm in as a coach, as a trainer at the time, you want to like you are the healthiest individual possible. Like you have to be, right? That's what your mind tells you. And so you like lie about a lot of things. You wouldn't admit to the health complications you're dealing with. Something would happen and you'd blame it on some ridiculous thing, like lie about it so people didn't know what you were actually doing and how mentally unstable you were and how unhealthy you were. And so there's lots of things that you would just cover up. And that stuff gets exhausting. It gets exhausting when you're dealing with gut issues. It changes your brain chemistry. You talk about mental disorders like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia and depression. And these are all derived from the gut. And so I was experiencing not schizophrenia, but like bipolar disorders and everything. Like I got labeled that all the time, ADD, ADHD, all these kind of things. And it would ruin my relationships with family, friends, significant others, but you just try to, it's their fault or they did this or they did that or whatever. And yes, it does take two, but at the core, I was still dealing with a lot of health issues. Rage fits, lots of aggression, lots of anger. I hated myself. And so enough was enough. Like I was like, I just can't live like this anymore, because I had begun working with Cody Moxley from N1 Education. And he introduced me. He didn't have quite the expertise in like the field that I am in now. They're more based around training and whatnot, but their training really facilitates a lot of physiological processes in terms of health, not just muscle building or fat loss. And so he had a bit of knowledge there, and he introduced me into detoxing because through all the years of everything that I've been through, the heavy metal exposures, just mercury, toxins, chemicals, you name it, just with the state that I was in, my body was not dealing with these. So as every year went on, but I ate healthy and exercised all the time, I got worse and worse and worse. My issues got significantly worse and worse and worse, especially my gut issues. So he had introduced me to detoxing, and that's kind of what I was already kind of getting into that realm of gut and detoxing and everything. But to have somebody with more knowledge than you kind of like educate you on it, that really sparked a lot of things. Because before I was just doing like a lot of weight loss with clients and whatnot. Also working with Alan with cancer, that's kind of where it started as well. That really propelled me into what I do now. And so him educating me on this, showing me what it entails, but experiencing it, not only it was horrible to go through, but coming out of the one side was amazing. But what I'll say is what we did was more of addressing symptoms rather than the root cause. So when I had started this detox protocol, or flushing protocol, we call it, because everybody hates the word detox, I felt awful. I was extremely depressed, extremely moody. I didn't sleep for like 3 weeks. I was aches and pains. Like there was so much going on. At the time, you're like, oh my God, this stuff is so bad for me. Why am I doing this? But then you realize this is part of the process. This is how we are flushing things. This is how we are stimulating responses in the body that haven't been stimulated for a while. So for example, when you're dealing with gut infections and chronic health issues, you are in this sympathetic dominant state. So you end up shutting things off like detoxification. Detoxification is not important for running from this saber-toothed tiger right now. And your body doesn't know that it's just coming from relationship stress, gut infection, or whichever. There's just stress there. So now you are telling your body to do this when it hasn't done it for so long. So you're getting headaches, the mood, sometimes ridiculous amounts of bowel movements depending who you are. Some people get constipated. They go on the opposite spectrum. But ultimately, there's quite a bit of side effects depending on the individual. And for me, there was a ton of them. And I was just like, I just hated it. But Cody just kind of kept talking me through it. And so then I come out the other side feeling better, but then I had relapsed again. And this time, like I went through a very bad relationship at this point, and obviously that's going to play a role into it. But there are also other factors in there as well, all sorts of other life stressors. And so you kind of just relapse. And so then you think, okay, well, that obviously didn't work. But it's not that it didn't work. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. But at that time, it was telling me, hey, there's something else going on. But we're in this such instant gratification society. It's like, okay, that obviously didn't work. This is not for me. But that's not the case. It's just telling you something else is going on. And I have this conversation with clients where we'll implement a supplement or a certain protocol and they'll be like, oh, it didn't work. No, it worked amazing, actually, because we learned something from it. Whether your body, quote unquote, responded or not, it tells us something and it gives us an opportunity to move forward with what we need to address that is actually causing these symptoms. So for example, with me going through that detox protocol, it was telling me that there's still something underlying creating all this inflammation, creating all these toxins, creating this poor clearance of hormones, etc. That is what that told us. Not that it didn't work. It actually worked amazingly and it did acutely until, kind of the root cause came back out. But now that was like, okay, I have to do something. Like, what's the next step? And that's when I started really venturing to gut health, but wasn't like super well versed on it. I did a few things with clients and to improve their guts, but those were, not to discredit anyone, but like very basic clients. Like they didn't have like extreme gut issues such as myself or like the clients I work with right now. So it was like, oh, okay, so that worked good. So then you kind of try it on yourself and you don't see like the best results. Or once again, you experience these crazy negative side effects, not understanding that, okay, this is a part of the process. So that is when, trial and error with these kind of things I take that back. I hate the word trial and error. It's trial and experiment if you're going to use that. But in reality, it's none of that. It's discovering what your body needs. So trying these protocols, I realized, okay, something more serious is going on. And if I'm being fully honest, I'm still struggling to figure out what brought me onto a GI map. Like if I saw it on Instagram or if someone had told me about it, for the life of me, I cannot remember what brought me onto a GI map. And so this is a company from Diagnostic Solutions, and they have one of the most accurate stool tests in that area kind of idea, PCQR test. And so anyways, I sought that out and I sought it out through Nutrition Dynamic. And so with Nutrition Dynamic, you can request to do with or without a review. And so I obviously requested a review because I didn't fully understand what a GI map entailed and whatnot. So I requested this review with this woman and I got my results back and you just saw like red. And what I know now, it's pretty serious. And, you don't want to upplay these things, but you also want to kind of create that awareness that, look, this needs to be addressed. Like you now have the opportunity to address this because most people can attest to this when they see a bad test, like lots of red or something high or whichever, they go into panic mode and they get depressed and stuff. And that's only ever happened to me once with all of the tests that I've taken. Every other test that I've taken and I've come back with very bad results, I'm just like, oh my goodness, if I feel this way now, I can imagine how I'm going to feel when I begin to correct these issues. And so it was an opportunity for me. I was very positive about it. The only one that really messed me up was a mycotoxin test, which I'll get into later. But so I took this GI map, I got my test results back, and then I set up the call with this woman. And she had explained to me what my stuff meant. Now, where I'm at now, she didn't do a very good job because there was a lot of context missing and whatnot. But me being so, I want to use the word eager, but more desperate than anything to feel the best I could ever feel and correct my issues and just be a brand new human being and prove to others that I'm not this bipolar disordered individual and that I do have intelligence and that I can do these kind of things. She recommended, to cut the story short, probably spent $1,500 on supplements. And because she recommended all these things that I could use and not really going into too much in-depth context, it's like she hadn't done that, I just started to use them all. So I got them all. I got every possible supplement I could, and I was taking these courses and I was doing this and I was doing that and everything. And so I implemented all of this stuff. And interestingly enough, I had felt really good actually in the beginning. And I think it was because it was something that my body had not seen ever. So it had this good reaction initially and my motivation had gone up because that's something that I really struggle with. Now, a lot of that could be placebo as well, because sometimes I feel like I need to be Superman, that I can fly and that I should have the utmost energy in the world and that I should have the most motivation, because that's where my biggest one. I want to be motivated every single minute of every single day to get stuff done, to learn, to be better, to create content, to educate people. So when I don't feel that, I go into this deep slump. And when in reality, not to take away from anybody, I'm probably a lot more motivated than most individuals. I probably have a lot more energy than most individuals. Because I'll never forget, I was working the drilling rigs. And this is when I got diagnosed with the sleep apnea. And I had picked up a sleep apnea machine. And I started taking it. And I felt much better. Crazy amounts of anxiety, though, because my body was now having all this oxygen to run physiological processes, which I didn't understand at the time. So I kept medicating for anxiety. But I remember going up to my driller and being like, yeah, like I like the machine, all this stuff, yada, yada, yada. But I said, I'm still tired. And he literally like stopped everything he was doing. He's like, man, we are all tired. Every single one of us here. And so that was where I was kind of like, okay, like you have this what's the word? Like everything has to be perfect. That's where my mentality goes. And that's why it's like difficult for me to create content as well. Like I put out a post yesterday on if you're considering going plant-based, and I kept it as short as minimal as possible. And it actually got some good traction where my brain goes, oh, this is a piss poor post and stuff like that. But that's what people want. They want that simplicity. But anyways, going off track, I realized that, and I was able to take a deep breath and like, okay, yeah, I mean, we're working 12-hour shifts in rain or sun or shine and mud and lifting heavy objects and all these kind of things. So yeah, of course, we're going to be tired. Doesn't matter. But I still want to be like, I want to be able to front flip out of bed and run all day long and get everything done and not have a crash and all these kind of things. So I was desperate to feel better. So I invested in all of these supplements, this ridiculous amount of supplements, and I started taking them all. And initially I felt better. And then I just felt awful. Not knowing why, because I still wasn't super educated in this subject as I should have been with what I was doing. So then that is when I sought out the help of Blake Grove, who is still currently my mentor. And I like to think we are good friends. And so he helps me out so much. He's always been there for me. And the sappy little kiss ass post I made, but I wouldn't have been able to do without him. And so he began to educate me on what I was doing wrong, and that because most people know I became heavily addicted to supplements, not only with myself, but giving them to clients as well. Now, supplements can be no different than medication. They can just mask symptoms. So then you end up feeling like you wasted all this time and money. Once again, they did something. They're telling you a story. We just weren't interpreting that story, or I just wasn't interpreting that story at the time. And so that is where connecting with Blake is how I was able to begin to understand, oh, okay, don't need all these supplements. Here's actually the damage that you're creating. But then I also went through a period of where it's like, okay, if you don't do this properly, you're going to cause liver damage, kidney damage, all these things when it's not true. Like you probably make yourself feel pretty ill, but you're not going to like long-term damage anything unless you continue to try to fight through something that was giving you horrible side effects. So connecting with him, he was able to not only help me understand like the process, the protocol, what happens when you do X, Y, Z. So initially what happened with what I did is because I'm always go hard or go home. A lot of people know me for that. So it was like, okay, instead of listening to my body and running a small amount of bacterial killers, I'm going to run them as hard as I can so I can get the job done faster. But the reality was I made it take so much longer and messed up a lot of things because using all of those killers, all of those products, I was destroying the gut lining, which creates this optimal environment for bacteria to grow. So I may have killed off like SIBO and some other bacteria, but I caused other bacteria to grow. So when I had taken another GI map, I retested, I actually had different levels of bacteria. I had like Citrobacter, all these other things that are related to the gut lining, the inflammation and the degradation of the gut lining. And so my GI map looked better, but worse. And when you're in that position, you're kind of like, oh shit, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. And that's something that took me a long time to live with, was like, maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing, based off of me coaching myself and then expecting perfect results. So for example, when a client wouldn't get certain results, I would be misinterpreting it as I don't know what I'm doing, when in reality, it's a part of the process and it's telling me, okay, so we did this and your body responded in this way. That means X, Y, Z is occurring. So here's how we have to address it, which makes it very difficult though, is people are tired of that. They don't want to keep switching things because then it creates this discombobulation, whatever you want to call it, within their mind. And they don't know what's doing what and everything. But where I'm at now, I can easily interpret that. So for example, recently, I've been using a product with some individuals who were giving off what we believe to be was Th2 symptoms. I'm not going to get into the intricacies or nerd out, essentially an immune pathway. So this product's supposed to block that. So we use this product, but then they got worse. So theoretically, that's saying they're not Th2. So then we discovered they're actually Th17. And so I learned that they didn't waste it, right? That taught us a very, very valuable piece of information. So now we no longer need to guess. We know this individual is pushing this pathway, not the one that they're giving off, because symptoms can overlap. All right. And I don't expect somebody to do. So here's the thing. You spend $50 on this supplement, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you don't feel as good. That just told us that you're this immune pathway. Or you could have spent $700 to take a test to tell you that you're immune pathway. So what's better or worse? $50, feel a little ill for about a week to realize, or spend $700, right? So when it comes to these things, you're learning, but I didn't understand that initially with both myself and with clients. So once I began to gain that knowledge and realized, okay, by us using this product and you're not actually getting any better, that's actually telling us you are dominant in this pathway, or your liver's doing this, or your gallbladder's congested, or you probably have a parasite or something along the lines of that. But with that being said, in the context of what I was saying, spending $700, that is an immune test, which you definitely don't need. It's very easy to figure out. For myself, it's very easy to figure out immune pathways based off of how the body's responding to certain things, or just based off symptoms and feedback. But when you're talking things like a GI map, when we're talking bacteria, you definitely don't want to guess with that. 10 times out of 10 times, if I have a client who has gut issues and we guess, they quit every single time. I recently had 2 quit because, and understandably so, I apologize. I'm not meaning to offend anyone, but sometimes it's just not feasible to take these tests. But what happens now is we try to guess on these symptoms and we don't make the best progression, or there's more flipping, flopping of things and switching protocols, which is very demotivating for people. Whereas if you have a GI map in front of you, okay, I see high levels of Citrobacter, I see high levels of Pervolta, I see high levels of Morganella, I see Bacillus, methane bacteria family. Then we're looking at SIBO, we're looking at gut line integration, we're looking at all these things. So I know, okay, I need to instantly go after this because I'm going to set this foundation to make your body better. So when we address this overgrowth, or when we address this gut dysbiosis, you're not going to have these super negative feelings and you're not going to want to quit. With that being said, though, with the alteration of the brain chemistry when you were doing these gut protocols, the effects it has on neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, all of them, GABA, acetylcholine, you're going to be very demotivated. You're going to really struggle to want to commit to this protocol. So not having that test makes that very difficult. 10 times out of 10, they get through the protocol. And because they don't have that test in front of them that I can explain as to why these things are occurring, they end up quitting. Because as mentioned, for example, this morning I was conversing with a client and he was talking about all these things are happening. And I'm like, it's part of the process. This is what's supposed to happen. Or it's like another client that I work with. He was working with a coach before and he felt good, but they weren't addressing any of the root causes. They were just masking the symptoms. So then we go in and address the root cause, which is mycotoxins and ulcerative colitis. We begin pushing things through the gut. Well, you're not going to feel good. And that's why I've had this discussion with Blake, my mentor, many times about some people will just never get better. Not that they physically can't, they just mentally cannot. They just don't have it in them to make it through a protocol, to commit to not eating processed food for a couple weeks, hell, maybe even months. Someone such as myself, in order for me to keep my gut lining intact, I really have to avoid processed foods while using the proper protocols for extended periods of time. And you go, okay, Curtis, well, why does this happen? Why does this? Because I got a stressful job. I work with people who are dying. I work with people who are in horrible moods and they take it out on you and you take it out on yourself. And I work with people who don't understand what coaching is like. And so they don't appreciate things, or they say certain things that really affect you. It's a very stressful job. And no, I'm not complaining. I signed up for this. No one's holding a gun to my head saying you have to work this. It's just the reality. But it's the reality I chose. So I'm going to have to realize that I'm going to be dealing with gut issues as long as I'm doing this job. Now, I'm going to be able to manage them though, and they're not going to be, causing me disease, but they might be withholding me from being the best person I can be. And that's a work in progress. That actually comes down to things like time management, client management stuff, rather than focusing on the gut. But that's the thing too. We're under such stressful environments when we go to address these gut health issues. I have so many clients that are so obsessed with the supplements and the food on the protocol or the training program, but they completely negate anything like actually going out of the city, going for walks in nature, meditating, doing self-lymphatic work, drinking teas, all these kind of things. There's so many factors that go into this. And so when it goes back to when I actually finally started making progression on my gut health, working with Blake, I woke up every morning using a wake up light. So I had that initial cortisol awakening response, which is super important for your healthy circadian rhythm. I would meditate before I do anything. I would journal. I would write. Even if I feel like it wasn't effective, I would still do it. I would take my dogs for a walk right away. I'd get my son. I would do some stretching. I would do yoga. And then the biggest thing was I'd stay off my phone. I think I talked about this in my ADD and ADHD podcast. I stayed off my phone. And so I put all these things in and I had a positive attitude, mainly because I had such a wonderful coach constantly uplifting me and helping me through the process, because that's what I really need. I'm the kind of person, I don't need my hand held. I just want to hear from you every day. And I didn't have that from previous coaches. And so that is where Blake was amazing for this, because every day he would converse with me, helping me stay on track. But I put in all this teeny little efforts that weren't on the piece of paper I was given. And I think that's where a lot of clients go wrong, is because they invest so much time and money and effort into this piece of paper that they think that's the end all be all, and that's what should be bringing the results, where all that stuff can be negated if you're not dealing with everything outside of that paper. And so that is where sometimes that's what the conversation between Blake and I was about, was that some people will just never get better no matter what you do with them, because they're not willing to address their stress and they're not willing to do the tiny little things that really add up over time to improve their health and wellness. And then people say, oh, well, then you don't have a life and all these kind of things. The average lifespan is what, 90, 80, something like that now. And if you take care of your gut health, you're going to live past that. So what's 6 to 8 months out of this life of not eating cheeseburgers, of not going out to restaurants, of not drinking alcohol, of waking up each morning and meditating and journaling, right? It's all that instant gratification though. We always want that instant gratification. If something doesn't work in 1 day, in 3 days, in 5 days, oh, it's not working. So why bother committing to this? And I get through it too. I complain to my clients. I'm like, oh, why bother? And then this week I was able to pull myself out of that. I'm like, why bother? Well, bother because you're going to feel the best you could ever feel by putting in all these little tedious efforts. And so I actually have like a very structured morning routine where I wake up and I do everything I mentioned previously, but I also hit the sauna and red light therapy and do all these kind of things. And that's what enables me to work this very stressful job that I do and still be manageable with my gut health. But I have my moments, right? So when I went through that initial gut protocol with Blake, as mentioned, that neurochemistry gets altered. So you justify a lot of things. You feel like crap, so you eat a burger because you feel like your brain is telling you that, because it is. It's saying, give me dopamine. Give me something to spike this dopamine because I don't have any dopamine. I'm so inflamed and full of neurotoxicity that I cannot absorb neurotransmitters. So I want you to eat ice cream and burgers or be mean to people because that stress response is dopamine, and that's how I'm going to build it. And so you go through these things and you have these moods and you have these fits and you eat like crap and you don't sleep. And it just, if you can't manage that, if you can't accept that this is what's going to happen, and you shake it off and know in a month, 2 months, 3 months that your life is going to be so much better, that all this hard work you're putting in, because hard work is feeling like shit. People think hard work is, as mentioned, following the protocol. And it's not hard to put a pill in your mouth. It's not hard to cook food and eat it. That is not hard. What is hard, physically to do that, what is hard is mentally bringing yourself to that. And then you have that aspect. So I have clients that do that. They mentally bring themselves there, but then they're not willing to do the hard work, accept that they're going to feel like garbage. Like they should be doing certain little protocols, even though they're busy. Like they should be doing meditation, even though they don't like it. Like they should be doing journaling, all these. That's the hard work. It's easy to follow what's on a piece of paper. We build IKEA furniture all the time. Okay. So that for me is, and I'm guilty. I'm just as guilty. I can be so weak when it comes to following a protocol or using my head, especially in the context of, oh, I don't feel the smartest today, so I need to take even more dopamine raising things when I should know that my dopamine receptors are already low. And so this is where that's hard work for me. Hard work for me is realizing, hey, you don't need that supplement today. You don't need it. You don't need any of those supplements today. You are fine. You are not going to die. You're not knocking years off your life. You're not making your gut health worse by not taking these supplements. What you could be doing is making it worse by taking these supplements. That's just an example. Or getting in these super sour moods and be like, screw everything, I need a burger. Saying no to that burger, that's freaking hard work. The emotional side of it is hard work. The physical side of it in gut health is not hard work. It's not hard popping a pill. It's not hard eating food that is placed out on a piece of paper. That's easy. Anyone can do that. It's the emotional, actually wrapping your head around that. And you have some very emotional people, myself included, that can really struggle to do this. And so this is where me going through this process really helps me understand when a client is acting a certain way or when their body is responding a certain way. Do I always take it in the best? No, because like I said, this job is extremely stressful. You have many people in a day contacting you about how ill they feel or what they're going through or about their mental state. And you just want, like my Cody, that Moxie that I mentioned, he always said to me is, if you want to be great at this job, you have to be a robot. And I'm so far from being a robot in terms of emotion, because I just take on that emotion of my clients. And I've always said it to like some very close clients, and now obviously to whoever's listening to this, that I think I'm too emotional for this job. And so that's been a big work in progress, because I could say, okay, I'm too emotional for this job and I can quit and I could go back to doing, I'm really great at physical labor, anything along that nature. Or I could realize that my purpose is to help these people, is to save lives. And then I just have to learn how to manage it. And so going through these gut protocols helped me realize a lot of that stuff, that we all have our moments. And so that's where it's like, okay, you can feel great one minute, but crap the next, but there's always like an explanation. And so for me, where I started like would feel good and then crap the next was because I had high levels of mycotoxins. And so that's mold metabolites. So as mentioned, younger kid living in a moldy environment, your food can be full of mold, things left out, all sorts of stuff. The biggest thing is environmental, though, homes and whatnot that tend to be full of mold. If you are somebody who walks in and you know you're in a moldy place and you start to get ill right away, you most likely have high levels of mycotoxins, or you have a genetic disorder, HLA, that you can't deal with this and you kick on that innate immune system and it doesn't shut off. And you're not getting that adaptive immune response. And so that was my issue. And so like anytime I got into a moldy environment, I felt awful. My mood significantly changed. My gut health significantly changed. My sleep significantly changed. My performance, my motivation, you name it. And so once again, Blake directing me in that way, pushing me in that direction, discovering that, yes, I have high levels of mycotoxins. Now that's the one that made me feel really depressed, because I read about all this brain damage and kidney damage. But then when you calm down, you take a deep breath, you listen to your coach, and then you realize there's actually proven articles that all of that stuff is reversible. It's not as big of an issue. It's just, they're going to plague you until you take care of them. So testing for the mycotoxins in conjunction with my gut health was how I was able to really address what was going on. And so, as mentioned, when I first got my GM up, I had SIBO, so small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And then I had autoimmune related bacteria. I had gut lining damage. I had no gut immune system. What else did I have? Can't remember off the top of my head, but I had no pancreatic function, all that stuff. Retesting, pancreatic function had gone way up. My gut immune system had gone way up. I got rid of the SIBO. But as mentioned, I created a little bit of other overgrowth in terms of gut lining. I also kind of killed off too much of my healthy flora, and I had undetectable levels of akkermansia, which was always low because I've always struggled with blood sugar regulation my entire life. So I'd constantly at one point I'd get hangry, but then when you get healthier, you can still have a blood sugar dip and not get hangry because your liver and adrenals are actually able to kind of maintain. Plus hanger is not always hypoglycemia. Hanger can be going from a 10 to a 5 rapidly. 5 is not hypoglycemia. I would get hypoglycemia. So then once I started populating my akkermansia and my enterococcus and my escherichia and whatnot, I started getting a lot better blood sugar balance and began feeling better. And now I don't stress about eating because I'd be like, oh, I can't go on a hike because I need my microwave. I need to be able to eat because if I don't eat, I'm going to get low blood sugar. Nobody understood that. And girlfriends and people would despise you for it and they'd be pissed off and they'd treat you poorly. It's like, you don't understand what it feels like. You have no idea what it feels like to have your blood sugar crash. So when you are one of those individuals who knows what I'm talking about, you damn well know what it feels like. And so it was very hard to do anything because I needed a readily available source of food because I was scared of my blood sugar crashing. But I was able to pinpoint that through the GI map, which, yes, is a lot of it's stress, but the GI map, what was it was indicating was poor stress management because you're already high in cortisol because you're dealing with this gut infection and you're dealing with these disrupted neurotransmitters and you're dealing with congested biliary ducts. And I had a parasite that's going to really mess up digestive function and brain chemistry and candida, like all these kind of things. And so taking that GI map, like actually working with Cody was probably one of the best things I had ever done. That sparked a lot. If I'm being fully transparent, I thought he was a prick. I didn't think he was a good coach. I didn't think he was a good mentor, not in terms of knowledge. He was extremely knowledgeable. He is extremely knowledgeable. I don't think we either just didn't mesh well, or it's just his style to not be a very good like educator. He had an attitude, but I don't know if that was just towards me or what. And he did spark a lot in me to really begin learning about that integrative medicine, about the functional health, Chinese medicine, like all these kind of things. And so I just started piling on course after course after course and experiment after experiment, especially with myself and learning all these things and other people who are really close to me, you know, putting their trust in me and discovering, okay, this is what the body is telling them. This is what we got to do. And then eventually leading into nutrition dynamic, into the GI map. And then that's where it really started. And that's where I really began to propel, not only on a knowledge aspect, but understanding why my behaviors were the way they were. And I actually became a better coach, still a ton of work in progress there, but a better coach in regards to coaching. Because I've always said this, you could be the most knowledgeable individual on earth. That doesn't make you a good coach. And I was not a good coach. I didn't connect well with my clients. I wasn't very empathetic. I wasn't very sympathetic. There was lots of things that just were not good. And sometimes I'm still not, but that's just because you get pushed to the edge by certain people and you're just under this immense amount of stress and you just want to have your own health and you want to feel best and you just take on everything. And so sometimes, that's why I always say it's a work in progress. But discovering that GI map, discovering how important gut health is on everything you could ever think of, every mental disorder, every disease, whatever it may be, gut health is interconnected in some way, if not the entire way, when it comes to these situations. Your gut, your microbiome is who you are. It's your personality. And so if you are somebody who doesn't, who has these mental disorders, who behavioral issues and so on and so forth, they can be addressed through your guts. I don't care what anyone says. Recently, someone tried to tell me it's not chemical. I'm like, everything about you is chemical. So if you're ever wondering why you feel a certain way, why you have these certain situations, it's that saying goes, everyone has a gut issue until proven otherwise. And in this case, discovering my gut health issue gave me so many answers, not just in my health, but why my childhood was the way it was, why every relationship was the way it was, why every friendship was the way it was, how I reacted to every client the way that I did, And I'm at a point in my life now where if people understood, I try to seek forgiveness, not trying to justify bad, I had gut issues, this is why I treated you this way. I don't try to justify it. But I try to seek forgiveness, and it sure as hell doesn't work because people are very, once you've done harm, you've done harm. But moving forward in my life, I try my best now because I understood why I acted the way that I had, and going through what I went through, it was hell. Like as mentioned, sleepless nights, terrible moods, achy joints and pain, constant diarrhea, bloating and gas, acne, you name it. All of these side effects that were occurring really made it damn near impossible for me to commit to this without eating a bunch of crap food, without overly taking supplements, without treating someone poorly. And that's, as mentioned, where when I had Blake's guidance, that made all the difference to where I could finally commit to something and see that progression, just put faith in the process and get through it all, no matter how hungry I got, or no matter how miserable I got, or no matter how poor my sleep was, to just know that, okay, if I keep doing this day in and day out, things are going to improve, and they had. And so where I'm at right now is I am dealing with a little bit of gut lining inflammation. It is due to poor eating habits. It is due to stress. And so that is where most of my energy is put towards with myself, is dealing with that inflammation. And then because of that inflammation, there's still a little bit of overgrowth that has to be addressed. At the end of the day, though, I am functional. I'm able to do my job. I'm able to really help my clients. I'm able to learn. So I'm not putting everything I have into a protocol right now. I will pick away at it, making sure I'm taking the right steps. Slow and steady wins the race. But until I get into a good spot, whether it's with the client, like time management, client management, and so on and so forth, I'm just focusing on my gut lining, making sure that is staying down. We'll say that you're not degrading that mucosal lining further, and just keeping my immune system intact, because I tend to be Th2 dominant. We thought Th17, so mine's kind of flippy floppy. So that's what I mean. So I take a certain product and feel a certain way. And so that's kind of how you learn your body. So right now, part of my gut health journey, which is still going on, doesn't mean everybody has to be like this. This is just my life that I've lived that led me to this point. All the abuse from a young age, and all the abuse even going into an adult, and all the stress. Right? And I'm not sitting here saying that I'm stressed, like, ooh, boo-hoo, me. No, that's not what I'm implying. What I'm implying is you can do this. There's ways to manage this. It's just, this is why I'm still currently working on some of my gut health issues. But it has given me so much knowledge and so much experience to help others get through this process and help them feel better. Because when you start getting feedback of women no longer having cycle symptoms, of women getting pregnant when they never thought they could, when you have people with autoimmune diseases and all of a sudden they begin to reverse, when you have people that couldn't get out of bed in the morning, they can, when they couldn't exercise for more than a half an hour without feeling ill, where they couldn't get through the day without having multiple crashes, where they couldn't sleep through the night without waking up 5 or 6 times. Like, that's what makes it all worth it. That's where all this stress you take on makes it all worth it. And working like children, when you hear the progression that children make, and it's just, oh my God, it's such a great feeling. It's such a great feeling. And so this is what strives me to not only help myself so I can help others, but helping others is just what my purpose is. And I'm able to fulfill that because I started a gut health journey, and I was able to improve my energy, improve my cognitive function, improve my digestion, improve my sleep, improve my detoxification, improve my stress management, improve my performance, you name it. And I know I'm going to go on to live a very healthy, long lifestyle, healthy, long life, disease-free, being able to help others as long as I can. So that was a bit of a tangents, rants, and kind of all over the place. It's a very, very passionate subject for me because, as mentioned, it had such a drastic impact on my life for the positive, but it was hell going through it. But that doesn't mean it's not working. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. That doesn't mean you should give up. Keep your head up high. You will get through this under the right guidance, doing the right things. It is more than possible. And you're going to be so glad you did it when it's all said and done. All right. So I hope you guys enjoy that. Take care, everybody.